Ambassador Sarah Chun stood in the grand reception hall of the Valdori Imperial Palace, surrounded by creatures that towered over her small human frame. The ceiling stretched upward for what seemed like forever, covered in living crystals that pulsed with soft blue light. Around her, delegates from 17 different species mingled and exchanged pleasantries in the universal tongue. This was her first major diplomatic event since Earth joined the Galactic Council 6 months ago, and everything needed to go perfectly. The Valdori were hosting this gathering to celebrate the signing of the new trade agreement between the Inner Rim worlds. They were tall beings, standing nearly 3 meters high, with silver skin that reflected light like polished metal. Their forearms moved with grace as they served drinks and greeted guests. Sarah watched them carefully, noting how they carried themselves with pride and ancient tradition. She had spent 3 years studying alien cultures before accepting this position. Her teachers had called her obsessive, but Sarah believed that understanding body language and social cues was more important than knowing which fork to use at dinner. Tonight, that obsession was about to save her life. A Valdori server approached her with a tray of crystal glasses filled with a shimmering purple liquid. Sarah smiled and reached for one, but then she stopped. Her hand hung in the air for just a moment as her eyes moved from the glass to the server's face. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. The server's third arm was positioned differently than the others she had observed. While most Valdori servers kept their lower arms folded behind their backs in a sign of respectful service, this one kept shifting its third arm toward its belt. More importantly, the server's eyes were not looking at the tray or at Sarah's face. They were fixed on her throat. Sarah had read about Valdori assassination techniques in her cultural studies. The traditional method involved a small blade hidden in the palm, delivered with a quick strike to the neck while the victim was distracted by offered refreshment. It was considered an honorable way to eliminate political enemies, a holdover from their warrior past that had never fully disappeared from their society. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed the server's third wrist and twisted it upward, just as a thin blade emerged from the creature's sleeve. The motion was so fast that several nearby delegates did not even notice what had happened. But the Valdori server certainly noticed. It let out a screech of surprise and pain as Sarah applied pressure to the joint. The entire reception hall went silent. Hundreds of alien eyes turned toward the small human woman who was now holding one of their hosts in a submission hold. The crystal glasses shattered on the floor, spreading purple liquid across the white marble. High Chancellor Vorthen, the leader of the Valdori delegation, pushed through the crowd. His silver face was twisted with what Sarah recognized as a combination of shock and fury. His forearms spread wide in a gesture that could mean either greeting or challenge. "What is the meaning of this outrage?" Vorthen demanded. His voice echoed through the silent hall. "You attack a servant in my own palace? This is an act of war." Sarah did not release her grip on the would-be assassin. She kept her voice calm and steady, even though her heart was racing. "High Chancellor, with great respect, I suggest you examine the right hand of this server before making accusations." Vorthen hesitated. His silver eyes narrowed as he looked at the server, then at Sarah, then back at the server. After a long moment, he gestured to his guards. 2 massive Valdori warriors stepped forward and took hold of the server. When they forced open its third hand, the small blade glinted in the crystal light for everyone to see. The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. Several delegates stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they had been to witnessing a murder. The server struggled against the guards, but it was useless against their strength. "That blade," Vorthen said slowly, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge, "bears the mark of the Silver Hand cult, a group that was supposedly destroyed 200 years ago." Sarah finally released her grip and stepped back, straightening her diplomatic robes. The Silver Hand cult believed that alien influence was corrupting Valdori society. Their assassination techniques were documented in the historical archives of the Council Library. I made sure to study them before attending this event. Vorthen stared at her with an expression she could not fully read. You studied ancient assassination methods as part of your diplomatic preparation? I studied everything I could find about Valdori culture, Sarah replied. Your people have a rich and complex history. I wanted to understand it fully, including the darker chapters. The High Chancellor was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his guards. Take this creature to the interrogation chambers. I want to know who sent it and how many others there are. The guards dragged the struggling server away, leaving a trail of purple liquid across the floor. The crowd began to murmur again, but Vorthen raised all four arms in a gesture for silence. Distinguished guests, please accept my deepest apologies for this interruption. It appears that enemies of peace have attempted to use this celebration as a stage for violence. He paused, then turned to look at Sarah with something that might have been respect. And it appears that the human ambassador has sharper eyes than any of us realized. Sarah felt the weight of hundreds of stares pressing down on her. She had just caused a major diplomatic incident by physically restraining a Valdori citizen in front of the entire gathering. Even if she was right about the assassination attempt, there would be consequences. Humans were new to galactic politics. They could not afford to make enemies. But then something unexpected happened. A Karathi delegate, one of the tall insectoid beings from the Outer Rim, stepped forward and began clicking its mandibles in what Sarah recognized as applause. Within seconds, other delegates joined in, each species showing approval in their own way. The Valdori themselves began to stamp their feet in their traditional gesture of respect. Vorthen watched this display with visible surprise. Then he turned to Sarah and extended his upper right hand, the highest form of greeting in Valdori culture, usually reserved for equals and honored allies. Ambassador Chan, he said, his voice now carrying warmth instead of anger. It seems you have earned a place at our table through actions rather than words. The Valdori respect those who can see danger before it strikes. You have done my people a great service tonight. Sarah took his hand carefully, mindful of the cultural significance of the gesture. High Chancellor, I only did what was necessary. I meant no disrespect to your people or your traditions. Disrespect? Vorthen let out a sound that might have been laughter. You prevented an embarrassment that would have haunted my house for generations. If that assassin had succeeded, we would have been known as the people who allowed a guest to be murdered under our roof. You have preserved our honor more than you know. The reception continued after that, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where before Sarah had been treated with polite indifference, now delegates sought her out for conversation. They wanted to know how she had spotted the assassin. They wanted to understand how a human, with their short lifespans and limited senses, could notice something that had escaped everyone else in the room. Sarah explained it as simply as she could. Humans had evolved as both predators and prey on a dangerous world. They had learned to read body language and facial expressions across many species, from the wolf to the snake. This skill had transferred surprisingly well to alien species, even those with completely different biology. The Mithrani ambassador, a floating sphere of light and gas, expressed amazement at this ability. We have mathematical models for predicting behavior, but they require extensive data collection. You made your assessment in seconds, based only on visual observation. Pattern recognition, Sarah said. It is something humans do without even thinking about it. We see a face in the clouds or danger in the shadows. Sometimes we are wrong. But tonight I was right. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself in a private conversation with High Chancellor Vorthen. They stood on a balcony overlooking the crystal gardens below, where bioluminescent flowers bloomed in the eternal twilight of the Valdori homeworld. The assassin has revealed much under questioning, Vorthen said quietly. There is a faction within my own government that opposes the trade agreement with Earth. They believe humans will bring chaos to the established order. Sarah nodded slowly. There are factions on Earth who feel the same way about joining the Galactic Council. Change is always frightening, especially when it comes quickly. Yet you came anyway, Vorthen observed, knowing that there would be those who wished you harm. Knowing that humans are still viewed with suspicion by many species. We came because isolation is not an option, Sarah replied. Earth is a small world in a very large galaxy. We need allies, trading partners, and friends. If that means facing danger, then we will face it. Vorthen was quiet for a moment, studying her with those silver eyes. You are very different from what we expected. The reports we received suggested that humans were aggressive, territorial, and obsessed with conquest. But you speak of friendship and cooperation. Sarah smiled slightly. Humans are many things, High Chancellor. We can be aggressive when threatened, yes. We can be territorial when our homes are at risk. But we can also be loyal, generous, and surprisingly good at making friends with people who are different from us. It depends on how others choose to approach us. A valuable lesson, Vorthen acknowledged. One that I will share with the Council when we meet tomorrow. The faction that sent the assassin will be dealt with, and the trade agreement will proceed as planned. The night ended with Sarah receiving a formal invitation to visit the Valdori capital as an honored guest. It was an unprecedented gesture, one that no alien ambassador had received in over a century. The diplomatic incident that could have ended her career had instead opened doors that might never have opened otherwise. As she boarded the transport back to the human embassy, Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief. Her hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but she kept them hidden beneath her robes. Tomorrow, there would be reports to write, meetings to attend, and a dozen new challenges to face. But tonight, she had proven something important. Humans belonged in this galaxy, not because they were the strongest, or the wisest, or the most technologically advanced. They belonged because they paid attention. They noticed things that others missed. They read the room, felt the tension in the air, and trusted their instincts when something felt wrong. The Valdori prided themselves on their ancient traditions and noble heritage. The Karathi had their mathematical precision. The Mithrani had their philosophical wisdom. And humans had their restless curiosity, their pattern-seeking minds, and their stubborn refusal to ignore the feeling that something was not quite right. In the end, that might be worth more than all the weapons and technology in the galaxy, because the most dangerous threats were often the ones that no one else could see coming. And humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to see them. Ambassador Sarah Chun closed her eyes as the transport lifted into the night sky, carrying her toward whatever challenges waited ahead. She was ready for them. She had been trained for this moment all her life, even if she had not known it at the time. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of possibilities. And tonight, one small human woman had shown everyone watching that humanity was ready to face both.